Hi everyone, how are you today? Well, I'm going to be doing something a little different. I have done this before, I think, but I will be working on some scratch art, which I have already started, as you can see, and talking about something that's come up recently in one of the book clubs I'm part of online, and that is how do we help children read? How do we encourage them to read more? Assuming that is that reading is worthwhile and enriching and all the things that we readers take for granted. So I'm going to kind of dig into that. First, I will show kind of the up close and personal of this design. I think it's a, well, you know what? I'm not really sure. This is from the Japanese $1.50 store called Daiso, which is popular in some parts of the US, and I bought this a while ago. Love these scratch arts. They're just kind of fun to do for unwinding, or they also make kind of nice cards or postcards to give to people when you finish them. But this is some kind of, I want to say pagoda, but I'm honestly not sure if it is a pagoda. But some kind of Japanese architecture here and some beautiful cherry blossoms, I would imagine. So anyways, I will be doing this and just rambling, so feel free to watch or listen as you like. But yeah, so this book club I'm part of was talking about getting children to read and sort of lamenting the fact that, well, it seems like, especially in the past decade or two, with social media and especially short form content like TikTok and YouTube Shorts and Instagram Reels really taking over children's attention. It's been kind of lamented by members of this group, but elsewhere too, that children don't want to read, or they might not feel drawn towards reading at all. And it's a shame, but I think that I have some ideas for how to help remedy this situation, and I'll share a few of them. I think the first thing I did want to say, though, and I don't know if this is a hot take, but I don't think reading is for everyone. But what I mean by that is reading as a hobby. I don't think reading as a hobby is for everyone. I will get into that in more detail later in this video, but what I want to say, how I want to frame this whole discussion, I guess, is I think that learning is for everyone, and reading is an important skill everyone should have. It should obviously be taught, as it is in schools, but I don't think that reading as a hobby has to be for everyone, especially in the 21st century. So again, I will get into that in more detail later, but I just want to start with that. I want to start with, I guess, my admission or confession, however you will, that I think it's okay if some kids don't want to read as a hobby. So anyways, starting with that basis though, what are some ideas I have for helping children to read? I think the first thing I want to emphasize is that reading should be a treat, not a task. And what I mean by that is, you know, as children are growing, and especially as they enter into their teenage years, there's a number of things that we need to be careful of as, I think, as older people, mentors, teachers, you know, maybe you have siblings or cousins that are quite a bit younger than you. We need to make sure that the reading isn't just another chore, right? We need to make sure that we're talking about reading as something that does bring us joy. I'm assuming if you're watching this video, it does bring you joy, because there's many other things you could be doing that are less time intensive. I don't know where I'm going with this, by the way. I wasn't really expecting the color here to be all silver as it is at the moment. It's kind of pretty, but I was kind of expecting there to be more color here. But anyways, we will carry on. So children, especially teenagers, they want to build their identity and individuality, right? And so, reading, if it is anything to these children, needs to be a personal exploration and an adventure. And when I was growing up, I mean, reading was very much that. It was an exploration. It never felt like a chore or a task that was forced upon me. Now, what was kind of a chore to me was my parents were really into watching documentaries. And so we never had a conversation where they were like, oh, you must read this book. Why aren't you reading more? Because obviously I was reading a lot. But the kind of conversations we would have on occasion were, oh, we're going to watch this documentary. You must watch it with us. It's such a good documentary, or it's going to teach us something important. And so often that was the case. We watched a lot of documentaries about travel, about history, and I learned a lot from those documentaries. But very often it felt more like less of an exploration and more of a requirement, some box to check off on my list at the end of the day. And it wasn't always that way though, because there were a few documentaries, and I'm thinking especially of this one called The Day the Universe Changed, which was, it was a show that was hosted by this, I guess I would describe him as a pop historian or pop science speaker, James Burke. Anyways, it's an old show from like the 70s, so I don't really know how, I don't know how much the information is still accurate, but that show was very entertaining, and he was very witty, and it was different, right? It felt more like an enjoyable thing we were watching as a family, and not just another long Ken Burns documentary to watch. Ken Burns being one of the foremost documentary makers that appears on public television in the United States. So, anyways, that's a bit of a tangent, but essentially, my first point here is maybe when we talk about reading, we talk about it less as, oh, you should do this, it's so good for you, and more just expressing the joy of it, expressing what we get out of it personally, and leaving it more open and less, this is a requirement. And so that's where I would say I think required reading should be sparing, and ideally in the form of a list that you, the child in this case, gets to choose from. But yeah, I mean, there were a handful of books over the years my mom had me read. But it was sparing, and most of my reading was just me picking up whatever random stuff I wanted to read. So that brings me to my next point, which is reading should be an interactive adventure. The bookcases in our home growing up were in themselves full of mystery and adventure. We had a lot of them, a lot of secondhand books and just books acquired over the years by my parents, a lot of books from Costco and such places. I don't know if Costco still does books. I think they might have just stopped, which is sad. But yeah, ultimately, we had access to all books in the home. And again, this doesn't have to be something that you pour a lot of money into. All the books we had were ones that were secondhand or sometimes given to us, or otherwise found at very discounted prices. And we had this one bookcase in the family room that was, it was on the wall, but it was really high up, and you had to climb up on a counter to get all the books down. And I really enjoyed, once I got to a certain age, climbing up there and just looking around at my parents' books. I guess that was the other thing, right? Like, they kept all their books like publicly accessible, and it's fun for kids to explore stuff that may not be considered age appropriate. Now, I don't mean they should be reading books that are age inappropriate, but if they stumble across your book on gardening or health topics or whatever it may be, it might be a good thing. It might be just that little bit of adventure and excitement that they need to pursue more. And so while I would not advise leaving out books in plain view that may not be good for kids to read due to the subject matter, maybe leave a few out that could really spark their interest but are more geared towards grown-ups, So yeah, that's obviously something that has to be based on the parents' discretion, but I think you get the idea. Another book we had that I absolutely loved, which was aimed towards kids, but it was a book about, it was like scary fairy tales. It was about dragons and witches and all kinds of creepy stuff. And, I don't know how appropriate that really was, to be honest, but boy, I love that book. It was fairy tales from, I think it was Eastern Europe specifically, translated into English. Loved that book. So yeah, not everything has to be, I guess what I'm saying is not everything has to be totally coded for children. I don't mean in a bad way, but like, it's okay for some kids to read grown-up books as long as you, the grown-up, is, curating what those are and it's not just, totally inappropriate stuff. Yeah, so, reading as an interactive adventure, but then, part of that is setting an example. And I think when I think about my own practices as an adult reader, I have to ask myself, am I setting the example I want to see children follow, whether they're my own children or other people's children? Am I on my phone in all my spare moments, or am I reading? Like, what sort of model am I setting? And I think we all can fall into these traps we're worried about children falling into more than we'd like to admit, I probably spend way more time on YouTube than I should be, or more than I spend on reading, maybe. And so as we think about encouraging children to read more, we have to set an example, and I think that goes for everyone, not just parents. But you're out and about, you're waiting at the store, you're waiting at the doctor's office. Are you just watching Reels? Are you just watching TikTok? Or are you emulating what you're worried about or what you want to see children actually do, which is pick up a book? For those of us reading ebooks on our phone, this may be a difficult one to pull off, but it's just something to think about, more generally. And that's not to say that watching short form content like TikToks is totally bad or something. I don't think it is, honestly. I think in moderation it's fine and it's fun, and I do it a fair bit. But, again, it's just the old cliche, but be the change you want to see. I think the other thing that ties into setting example is reading to your children, or to children, whether they're maybe your nieces or nephews, and then reading to each other, encouraging children to read back to you. I spent a fair bit of time reading with my brother when he was very young, and we picked fun books, we picked funny books, funny classics. We read The Hobbit, we read Three Men in a Boat, we read The Club of Queer Trades by G.K. Chesterton, which is a really funny book. Yeah, that, again, making it interactive and also setting an example goes such a long way towards reading. Because reading is relational as well, It's the reason people seek out these book clubs is because we don't want to just read a book, we want to have a conversation. Of course, there's the conversation with the author, but when you converse with each other human beings who are having something of a similar experience, it's not the identical experience, but that allows you to fully process the book better and feel like you're part of something and not just reading a book in isolation and everything. So I don't know, that could be helpful too, especially some teenagers. So this kind of leads me into my fourth theme here, or fourth idea, which is I think we can encourage children to read more by creating a culture of reading. And this isn't just parents, this isn't just schools, but it's everyone. And I'm thinking about libraries, I'm thinking about certain shows on public television. When I was growing up, we had Wishbone, which was a little dog who reenacted stories from classic literature and explained how they tied into real world lessons. And I just love that show, absolutely love that show. I don't even think it's played on public television in a very long time. I'm really dating myself here, but you know, things like that, if we as a culture would value and embrace, especially those of us who are readers and want to be advocates for reading as a medium and as a pastime, culturally we could do a lot more with this and invest more and encourage other adults to invest in it, right? It's not that, I mean, the whole weight of reading doesn't lie on children's shoulders. It's we adults need to come together, you know, and say we do value this. We think it has an important role in children's development and in the development of education. And so we all need to invest in it. We need to make sure that these shows are still playing and that libraries can still function. So I don't want to get into any this isn't meant to be a political spiel, right? This is literally just one of many pieces I think that are important to helping children read more. The last thing I want to talk about then on this topic, because I don't want this video to get too long either, the last thing I wanted to say was I do think we have to reconcile with living in the 21st century. And what I mean by that is that obviously I've kind of waxed nostalgic a bit here in this video, talking about my own childhood and like physical libraries, right, and in my parents' home. But you know, realistically speaking, we do live in a very different time period. We live in a world where oral storytelling, for example, has had a big comeback through podcasts and videos and everything. And so I think we need to embrace this. We need to think about reading and how it can be complemented by and complementary to other forms of learning, such as, you know, video games, movies, and so on. One of the things that, you know, you can do obviously is just say, okay, we're going to watch this movie that's coming out in a month or so, but it's based on this book, so let's read this book together before the film is released. I mean, easy one there, right? And then the other thing you can do though is just encourage your child to, you know, this is a very easy way to get into literary analysis. You can be like, okay, let's compare the book to the film. And by engaging your child as sort of a junior film critic, right, you can get their gears turning and see literature as not just an entertaining story, but a vehicle for thought. And I guess that really is what I want to end with here. And I think I alluded to it earlier, but I don't think reading is for everyone, and yet I do think reading is very important in terms of seeking information and teaching children to critically analyze information. This is what we need more desperately than ever. And I'm like, this is not an original idea. Everyone's talking about it right now with the advent of AI that's being used by consumers and in the workplace everywhere. But yeah, critical thinking, human connection, critical thinking and human connection, that is where novels are important, as well as developing empathy in children and, again, always, you know, exploring the world. But I would say that, again, with podcasts are not a replacement for reading, but they can help be a gateway into reading, and especially this all-important area of reading to gain information and to learn how to think critically and analyze sources. So that's where I'm like, okay, I think as we talk about encouraging children to read, let's focus less on reading as entertainment, although that is valid, and I think it's still very fun for many of us, and and it can be a good way to get people into reading in general if they like reading for fun. But I've known many people, well, several people, that read more to learn, and they would not be considered readers as such. Reading is not their hobby, but it is a way for them to connect with ideas and with other people, past and present. So I think, and those people would not view reading again as a hobby. As a hobby, they'd probably go for a walk or they'd go cycling or something, and that's totally fine. And as we spend more time in front of screens, collectively, we should not discourage people from seeking hobbies that are more physical, just because we have to get out of the house at some point. So I guess where I'm going with all this is I'm less interested in encouraging children to read just anything. And I don't mean that in any derogatory sense. I mean, I of all people love reading for entertainment and, the emotional connection I have with books and authors. But I do think that if we're talking about, the role of reading today and why would we make the effort to encourage more children to read and to read more, I think we have to think about it from an educational standpoint primarily, and again, encouraging them to connect different mediums. So not putting reading in opposition to all these other mediums, but showing how it can be used together and to get more out of those other mediums as well. So anyway, I will stop rambling there. That was kind of the jumble of my thoughts. I guess I had one more thought here, was just that, again, we don't have to get people to read 400-page novels necessarily. I think short form in writing is also powerful and important. So, encouraging kids to read short stories, poems, haiku, different kinds of, poetic expression and prose expression, microfiction, like that should all be encouraged as well. And is so much more accessible in many cases. So anyways, that's my thoughts on this matter. Let me know if you have any thoughts, if you disagree with me, or if you have some experiences you want to share. But thanks for watching, and I will hopefully see you next week. Bye.